iHeartRadio Broadway, driven by Mercedes-Benz.
So I had worked with our director, Michael Greif, in 1986 on Big River, and he was the assistant to Des McAnuff. He was not the established, fabulous Tony-nominated director that he is now, but he put me into the show, and we've remained in touch all these years. And he reached out and said, I'm working on this show. I think there's a role for you. I'm going to send you a script. The way I prepared is that I recognized her as a person immediately when I read the script. I understand mentors, I understand mentorship, and I've had several really good ones in my life. So I began to think about the ones that had the most impact on me as an actor, and I kind of started from that as a base. And then Michael and I began to talk about her backstory, the things that people don't know about her that are not in the script, and how I could bring those things out in the show so it feels mysterious, like you know something's there, but you don't know what it is. One who taught her in middle school actually is in our show, and she plays the piano on stage. When we gesture to the musicians to take their bow, she's the second to last person you see, but she turns around to the audience and waves, and her name is Aziza Miller, and Aziza is making her Broadway debut in her 70s. It's been wonderful because you get to utilize, all of for me, I got to utilize all of the mentors that I've had. I actually took small pictures. I was going to make a collage from my dressing room, and I still may do it. But I have pictures of the 5 people who I consider the people who shaped me the most as an actor and as a human being. And so just utilizing the lessons that I learned from each of them and pulling them all together helped put together Miss Liza Jane. It was very much out of body a lot of the time because I did do the show with a lot of the original cast that was still there. And one of my mentors actually is Ben Harney, who's still around. He won the Tony for Best Actor for Dreamgirls. And it was such an education on so many levels, professional as well as personal. It was the first time that I had to learn how to do 8 shows a week, singing hard. And one of my other mentors, she's gone now, is Deborah Bird, and she taught me how to sound like I was singing hard gospel without hurting my throat. And I credit her for that, and I appreciate that because 40 years later, I can still sound like that and sing like that, and I have vocal health. The first funny story that comes to mind with Once on This Island is when we were doing the workshop of it before we went off Broadway. Lynn Ahrens and Stephen Flaherty had only had one show. And it did kind of okay. So we wound up being their first big hit, right? And we were workshopping the show, and they were trying out the material. And if people know the show, by now people know that the lead character dies and turns into a tree. And I remember in the room when we first read that, I was like, wait, stop. This is New York. Nobody's going to buy her turning into a tree. You need to change that line. You really need to change that. Duh. It became one of the most loved parts of the show all over the country. People scream and clap whenever they say, a tree! It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So that's a fun story from there. And Drowsy Chaperone, one of the things that Casey Nicholaw, who directed the show, asked us to do when we were in rehearsal in LA before we came to Broadway. He asked us all to do bios. So if you know the show, it's a show within a show. So we're playing actors from the 1930s who are in this show playing these characters. So he wanted us to write bios of ourselves as those actors in the 1930s. So there could be levels of funny, and some of it being like little private jokes that we knew amongst each other, but it would come out on stage. And I remember listening to people's stories, Danny Burstein and Beth Level and Sutton Foster. Everybody's story was hysterical. Everybody's story was layered and rich so that when we looked at each other on stage, we knew all this stuff about each other, which was a lot of fun. The first thing that I look for is some type of power, some type of strength. I think I've learned over the years nobody buys me as being a waif. Nobody buys me as being not strong. So I look for where is the strength in this person. It may not be automatically seen or noticeable, but look for that. And if I can find that, then, I'm happy to start working on the character. And I also look for someone who has an arc, if possible, because very often, especially as an African American actor, roles are just now beginning to be written where people of color have an arc, where you don't see just the tragedy or you don't see just the comedy. You see what happened before, what happened in the middle, and what happened after. And even if it's just one episode of something on television, being able to do that is very, very fulfilling. So I look for that. Is there an arc, or are we only seeing one dimension of this person? I became a single parent when my son was 8 years old, and raising a young black boy in New York during the times that we were living in and are still living in, where so many young men were being killed just for being brown and walking down the street. So I had to prepare my son for living in probably a very different way than a lot of parents have to prepare their kids for life. And so that, married to this material that I get to sing, I see those people in my mind's eye when I'm singing. I see Sandra Bland. I see Trayvon Martin. I see Rodney King. I see all these people that we have watched over the years that have been brutalized for no reason other than their color. And so because that's been a real experience of mine, I do have to shake it off after I finish the song, even to get to Act 2. Some days I have to work a little harder. Some days it's pretty easy. But the days when it's hard, usually what winds up happening is our leading lady, Malia, who I do that scene with, I'm singing the song to, she can tell, I'm getting choked up, she can tell when it's hitting me hard, and she always comes after me to make sure I'm okay, and gives me a hug or gives me a kiss and say, you're okay, your kid is okay, we're all okay. So that usually brings me back to where I can finish. Two things. The primary thing I hope they take away is an appreciation for their parent, particularly if you didn't have a great relationship, whether it was one or both, that you take a look after you see our show, look at yourself, look at your parent, and try to find where they did their best, even if it wasn't what you felt was best for you, and appreciate that, because it is quite a sacrifice and quite a journey being a parent. The other thing that I hope people take away is to appreciate their mentors, the people who poured into you. Sometimes it is your parent, sometimes it's a teacher, sometimes it's a neighbor, a friend, an auntie, a grandparent, whoever those people are who encouraged you as a young person that you could do whatever you set your mind to, and they were your cheering section, to tell them thank you. Because a lot of times we become adults and we forget about that part of it and we don't say thank you. So I hope after people see the show and they see Miss Liza Jane's journey, that they begin to recognize that those people are very precious and they deserve to know that they're appreciated. Those three things that I learned: be excellent, be honest, and be respectful. Those are the primary things, because you never know if the person who is, the assistant to your director is going to become a 5-time Tony-nominated director later on and could be your boss. You don't know. So as much as you can, do that. And as far as excellence is concerned, I always tell young actors, become the best at whatever it is that you do. I also liken it sometimes, I use this analogy with young actors as a bowl of fruit. There's all kinds of fruit. There's apples and oranges and pears and bananas, all these beautiful fruits with these different flavors and different colors. If you walk into an audition and you're an apple and you don't get chosen, maybe they wanted a banana. There's nothing wrong with you as an apple. You taste good, you're shiny, you're gorgeous, keep shining your apple. because you're going to walk in a room one day and they want an apple, or they think they want a banana and you change their mind that they actually wanted an apple. So always be excellent. Do your very best to be excellent. Don't slouch. And if you slouch, stay home. You know, reschedule the audition. Don't walk in a room and not be your best.
iHeartRadio Broadway, driven by Mercedes-Benz.